Hi, I'm Professor Leah Rapaner. As a sociologist, I've made it my life's mission to take down every ridiculous gender myth out there. Like, do pretty people get paid more, or are women better multitaskers? This is Misperceived.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Misperceived. On today's episode, I'm going to talk to you about the care crisis. I'm going to talk to you about the Gray Tsunami. But before we do that, I want you to close your eyes. Now, if you're driving, of course, you can't close your eyes. If you're walking on a street, don't close your eyes there either. But I want those of you who are in a safe, secure space to close your eyes. I'm going to give you a scenario and I'm going to ask you a question. I want you to think about someone who is an employee and they walk into their job one day and they go into their boss's office and they say, I need to take some time off of work, or I need my work to be reduced to part-time because I'm a caregiver and it's just all too much. I can't do everything all at once. As you're closing your eyes and you're thinking about this person who's gotten up in the morning and that day has decided, I need some help, I need some support, and I just can't keep going. And they walk into their workplace and they make this request. What do you envision in your brain? Is it a woman or is it a man? For most of you, it probably is a woman. Is that person asking for this help in terms of supporting their care because they're a parent? Do they have a little kid in the home? Is that what it looks like? Or do they have a teen? What do you think? For most of you, I'm going to bet that the answer is going to be you envision a woman walking in who is a mother with little kids at home and she just can't do it anymore. When we do this type of research as social scientists, one of the things we find out is the way in which unconscious bias, or the way in which we've been socialized to think about caregivers as one thing, pops into our brain. Now, if you had that image of a woman and she's probably a mother, in part that's because we've told you, and I've told you on this podcast, that caregivers are often mothers, right? They're often women and they're often parents. On this episode, I'm going to tell you why some of that is all wrong, why we're getting that piece wrong, including me, right? Why that is a important focus, but it's not the only focus. And the reason I'm saying that to you is we often think about care as being just care we give to our children or care that mothers provide. But care is so much more diverse than that. I want you on this episode to start thinking about care and the diversity of ways in which we care. I'm asking you to do this because I'm telling you, I think we are right now in a care crisis. I think we are going to continue to be in the crisis of care. And part of that is because if you're living in, say, Australia, or you're living in the US, or you're living in the UK, that you are in the center of the Gray Tsunami. Many of people in, if you're living in Europe, this is kind of the experience that you are about to have, and you're going to continue to having it. Now, I know you're already like, wait, girl, what's going on? Gray Tsunami, mothers, and caregiving. Let me bring the pieces together. We have for a long time understood care as being the care that is provided from mothers or parents to children. Women are disproportionately responsible for caregiving. But I want you to start thinking about the diversity of care. I want you to start thinking about care that you may be providing to, say, older or aging parents. I want you to start thinking about care you're providing to friends. I want you to think about care you're providing for a spouse or a child. I want you to start thinking about care you may provide for your pet. I want you to start thinking about caregiving and care as being this diverse range of experiences, this diverse range of moments where you're being asked to care. The reason I'm saying this to you is because what we're about to face right now in terms of a care crisis is significant. The reason is that we have a huge population of aging adults in countries like the US, in countries like Australia, in countries like Italy, even China, right? China instituted this one-child policy in part to help get their economy to have fewer people to whom the resources are going. But they are also now an aging population. South Korea is an aging population. That this silver, what they call a silver tsunami, or this idea that these people are aging and they are going to require care, is a huge crisis. It is going to be a huge demand on our lives, and our caregiving is going to span across our lives. And we are either going to be called upon to care for someone we love, a child, an aging parent, an auntie, an uncle, a friend, a spouse, or we ourselves are going to require care. We ourselves are going to be living with a chronic illness. We ourselves are going to be living with a disability. We ourselves are going to require some sort of care as populations age. I am obsessed with population structures, in part because populations have momentum, right? And what I mean by that is like, you can't turn the population around super quick. You can't go like, hey, you know what? We have a problem coming and we need to like tomorrow stop this challenge. That's not what's going to happen. You're going to start to see that populations are going to shift the way in which we consume, the way in which we interact with each other, the ways in which we are, our family dynamics, and the way in which we work. I am saying this to you at this moment in time because what I'm seeing in the evidence is like, this is the crisis that is here this moment. But what we're talking about is AI. Like what we're obsessed about is like whether the robots are going to come for our jobs, whether generative AI is going to come for our jobs. What does that mean? Like if you read the news, all you can hear about is AI, AI, and AI. But the problem is that the future of work is going to be so much more intertangled and diverse that like AI is only one piece, but actually the demographic transition of an aging population is going to be a big thing. What I'm hearing in my interviews from people who are sandwiched in between this care, from women and men, mothers and fathers who have cared down to their kids, but now are all of a sudden in this position of caring for their aging parents, is they're describing mental loads that are on overdrive. They're describing mental loads that are on steroids. They're talking about the fact that they actually have to think about whether their aging parent has had a fall, whether they're having early signs of dementia, whether they're taking their pills. They're also have to think of their medication, right? They're also having to think about whether their children are okay, whether their teenagers are getting into trouble, whether their teenagers' mental health is okay, whether their teenagers are doing well in school, whether their teenagers are being bullied at school. They might even have little kids in the home, right? Think about the intensity of care, both physical and mental load, cognitive and mental labor that happens on that. And there's this sandwiching of this generation of people who have aging parents or aging relatives or aging caregivers, and then the little kids. I told you in one of the last episodes, we're already seeing 500,000 US workers exit the labor market, mostly women, mostly in this age band, because there is not enough bandwidth for them to step into this care. And what I am going to say to you is this is only going to get worse. I don't mean that to make your mental loads worse, but what I'm saying to you is this is only going to continue because you have currently right now in the US population, 67 million baby boomers, 67 million. That's 20% of the population. If you're in Australia, the number is pretty much the same. 20% of the population are those who are aging. If you read like I do, the literature on what this means for us in terms of the economy, in terms of the future of work, there's two things going on. The first thing is that this cohort of baby boomers is driving consumption right now. They're driving, it's called a K-shaped economy. They're driving where all the dollars are being spent. They have some of the most wealth of all generations, but let me be clear when I say this. They have the most wealth of all generations, but in fact, not every baby boomer is wealthy. There are many who do not have the resources to take care of themselves later in age. And what happens in my interviews is people will say, what do I do about this? My father doesn't even have enough money to pay his bills. He's 75 years old and he's there and he's unwell and he's diabetic and he's, prone to a fall, but he has no money to pay for the rent. He has no money to pay for the bills. He has no money to pay for someone to come in and provide aged care. And who's going to do that? I have to do that. And I think about it all the time. So this generation has a huge amount of wealth, but not everybody. This generation is driving the US economy right now. The most recent article I read was like, do you know why we haven't hit a recession? Well, in part because this generation is fueling that. And it's fueling that in terms of the need for healthcare, the need for assistance, the need for services. What you're going to start to see is as you have an aging population, economic consumption is going to shift. It's going to move away from, innovation or young people, and it's going to move towards care for these older generations. How do you do it? I am saying this to you because across the interviews, I hear this as a huge mental load drain. I hear this as a piece of the emotional support we're providing to aging populations. I'm hearing this as a piece of the relationship hygiene. So for those of you who are new to this, the mental load is the emotional thinking work we do to keep our work, family, and life running. It has 8 different pieces. My book, Drained, Reduce Your Mental Load to Do Less and Be More, will introduce you to all 8. One of those is relationship hygiene. Are we connected to the right people? Are we doing that? The other is life organization. Does everyone have what they need to thrive? Another is safety. Are people safe in their homes? Are people taking their medication? Are they prone to a fall? Another is, what kind of world do I want to create? What kind of world do I want to live in? The aging population, the silver tsunami, is putting an incredible amount of pressure, in particular around those in our family that are providing care for others. But I want you to start thinking about the fact that this is also people who are, providing care for a spouse. This is also people who are needing to receive care. I want you to stop thinking about care as being gendered, that like, it's just the work that women do. And I'm going to tell you that the demand is going to be so great that it is going to be the work we do for all of us. Here's where I'm going to get my passion on. I'm going to try to give you my summary at this point, because I know I've thrown a lot of things at you. 1, populations have momentum, which means the care crisis is not done. It's only going to get worse. 2, the future of work is going to be about AI. Yes, but it's also going to be about care. This aging population and care. AI, it's going to be about climate change. It's going to be about shifting values. It's going to be about eroding democracies. So if we need to prepare for our future work, we need to have all of these pieces on our radar and thinking about them. 3, the mental load to caregiving is so much bigger than just parents to children. It's a mental load to care for everyone and how we can step into our worlds to provide care, making sure that everyone in our life is okay. And 4, this is going to absorb an even bigger section of our GDP, because the demands of that population are not going to disappear. They're only going to intensify. So there is a lot of work to be done and a lot of money to be made. The problem is that from my perspective so far, and I would love it if you have information, articles, stuff you're reading that can correct me on this. To date, the government response has been, this generation, baby boomers, you've made a lot of money. You're going to solve all of your care problems to the market. You're going to use that money to solve the care crisis, and you're going to have to step in. This is going to inevitably fail. The reason is not everyone has a huge amount of money, A. B, there's an expectation that government will step in and provide Medicare and Social Security. There's in the U.S., healthcare in other countries, right? And superannuation for my Australian listeners. And there isn't a cohesive or plan about what to do in terms of housing and services. My request for you, so there's going to be so much demand that if you are actually not well positioned to respond to this intensification of demand, the response is going to be use your own money to solve it, have your own family solve it, or we'll bring in lower earning, low wage immigrant work to solve this problem. This is an untenable, unsustainable solution. May I ask for something different? May I suggest an alternative world for us? Is it possible that instead of thinking about old systems and old ways of solving our care crisis, which I am telling you is here and is only going to get worse because the Gray Tsunami is here, may I ask that we start to think about care at the center of our economy? And may I ask that we start to think about innovative ways to provide care to others? It may be actually technology does some of that work. It may be that AI is part of the solution. It will not be the only solution. It will also ask for us to think about intergenerational care, to think about community care, to think about how we can leverage our own resources, insights, and talents to care for others. Can I ask you, if we shifted our economy away from GDP, which I looked at is, how much we consume, how much we invest in business, how much we produce, and how much we export? What if we started thinking about how much we care for others? What if we started to have a gross domestic product to care? And what if we started thinking about the ways in which we show up for everyone in our lives, in our organizations, in our communities, in our families, in our homes, to make sure that care is at the center? What I mean by that is if you're at a workplace and you know someone is there balancing the care between their aging parent and some young child, their young children, how can you make that workplace more inclusive? How can you create care infrastructure that helps them? And how can we create a safety net so that they do not feel like they are carrying it alone? How do we make sure that we think about care, not just about that kind of sandwiching, but also people maybe who had a parent who died, people who maybe are in the throes of grief, people who maybe, are they themselves requiring an increased care demand? They need different things because they are living with a chronic illness. They are aging and they do not have, say, the physical or cognitive ability. How do we make sure that they are still included in that workforce? How do we make sure that work still utilizes their talents and strengths, but doesn't boot them out exactly the minute they aren't the ideal worker or totally unencumbered and 24/7 available? I am going to propose to you that the system that we have right now isn't working, and you're actually seeing the ways in which it's crumbling. That what you're seeing is that we can't sustain this. It's not possible. We can't sustain this and then still ask for everyone to be at their 100% peak in terms of productivity and GDP. How many widgets you're producing, how many hours you're there. It is not possible. And you're seeing the crumbles of this already. You're seeing the fact that almost 500,000 women left employment, in part because of, the fact that they're sandwiched in this care. But I'm also saying to you, the people who are remaining in the labor market, who have to keep care secret, who can't tell their employer, their employees, anyone that they are a caregiver or what they need for fear of retribution, for fear that people won't support them, for fear that they'll be pushed out, for fear that they will no longer have healthcare or supports. That is not a system that works. If we start to put care at the center and start to think about building an infrastructure of care that is not just asking for people to be giving their unpaid labor or asking to suck up immigrants from around the world to do work that actually often is low wage, low paid, and not high quality. If we start to think about how do we care for everyone who's in this system, can we create a different world? What kind of innovation can we create? What kind of workplace would we create? What kind of community would we create? If we stop thinking that we are all individual agents responsible for our own care, but we started to think about the community connections we can build. Now, I know you're like, girl, you are talking in a utopia. What kind of world are you building and who's going to pay for this? I know. I'm already here. I'm with you. I'm going to say a couple of things to you. This cannot be just a government solution. You're going to need everyone to be a stakeholder to buy into this. You are going to need government intervention, government support, and government money. The government is already paying for the care of aging people in part through our healthcare system. Do we have a sense whether that is actually the ideal system, right? There's a lot of money to be made in these systems. Do we actually know if that money being invested and spent is actually giving good returns, and is it investing in innovation? We are going to need workplaces to invest in this, to start thinking about care as a central piece and to start thinking about their responsibility to their employees. Australia has just passed a new law about workplace and wellness. You have to create a space where there's psychosocial safety. There's going to be a question about what that looks like. You need workplaces to buy in. You need individuals and communities also to buy in. You need them to understand that care is actually valuable, that care has a price, that care comes with a cost, and the people in those caregiving roles require, adequate payment. And we should be thinking about how do we work together in terms of both our talents, our money, and our ideas. May I give you my utopian answer, why this is actually good? Sorry, it's actually an educated academic answer about why this is good for everybody. If we know actually that care crisis is here, it's not here tomorrow. It's not here 20 years into the future. It's here right now. It will continue to structure our economy in many of these developed, affluent nations, right? This is going to be a central piece because again, the demand is too big. If we know this is here and we start to think about how do we innovate our care infrastructure, I am going to say to you, if we get good ideas, good solutions that are, some will be high cost, some will be low cost, some will be technological, some will be community, some will be workplace interventions, some will be, wellness questions about what might work in terms of, mobility and how we might lean on our neighbors or community to help social interaction. I mean, I'm throwing a bunch out there. You can then export these. You can then turn these into ideas that you could then sell to other countries, that interventions that this could spawn our GDP. This could create technological innovations or workplace practices and innovations, government practices and innovations that will help other countries deal with the care crisis. If we don't do anything about this, what you're going to see is that our GDP, our productivity, and our labor market are all going to get sucked into this huge care crisis. All the money, all the energy, everything's going to go into this without a clear return, without a clear idea of how are we doing it well? Are we doing it in a way that creates quality of work for people, quality of life for people, quality of community for people? We know that other countries have not GDPs, but they have global, how happy people are, right? Like Bhutan has this thing about their measure of a success of a society is whether people are happy. What if we turned our measure of a success is whether people in our society are well cared for? I'm just going to say that again. What if our focus instead was about whether people in our society were well cared for? What would that look like? And how could we take any of those learnings and then bring them, share them around the world? I think we'd have the double benefit of being the innovator and the leader and have a population that thrives and reduce the mental load. What do you think? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Send me an email, come onto my socials, comment into our podcast. We're on Spotify, Apple, everywhere. Let me know. And can I just give a shout out to Laura? Laura, I don't know who you are or where you are, but you have been commenting on all of the episodes in Spotify. And I just want to say, I see you, I appreciate you, and I thank you. Laura, you are the best. I was like reading them and I was like, oh, Laura. So I'm sending you love. Okay, as per always, thank you for listening to Misperceived, where you do not need a PhD. You just get to come hang out with me. And aren't we having a great time? And can I ask, what kind of community, culture, mental load, society would we have if instead of having productivity at the center, we had care? What would that world look like? And what kind of benefits would we get? Let me know what you think. Have a great week. I love you. Mwah. We are so lucky and grateful that this series is being supported by the Melbourne Public Humanities Initiative at the University of Melbourne.